Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the FlyWoo Explorer LR. LR stands for long range. This is a collaboration with FlyWoo and Dave C. FPV. We've got 1404 2750 kV motors with Gemfan Hurricane 4024 bi-bladed props. Camera is a Runcam Nano 2. Flight stack is the FlyWoo Goku F411, so the flight controller is an F411. 13 amp 4-in-1 ESC, and right back here is the Goku VTX 625, which is power switchable up to 450 milliwatts. This is the finder, which has a buzzer and an LED light, and right up here is its own battery, and of course it has its own GPS. It also features an extra long circular polarized antenna. I know I'm missing a screw, more on that later. It comes with a second set of props, an extra rear and front arm. I think it comes with these LEDs, but it might not. Check the product webpage. Various screws and stickers. It weighs just under 133.5 grams. I flew it on this all-line 854S battery, which brings the weight to just over 230.5 grams. There is a mount available for the Insta360 Go, but I don't have it. With just the Insta360 Go camera, it brings our weight to just over 253 grams. We're going to do this review a little differently than we normally do. Now, typically, I just show you a full flight, but because this is long range and this thing flies for a very long time, I'm going to break this down a little bit because I don't think anybody will watch it, then you end up getting lost and trying to get the information you want. So I do want to kind of compress all the flight footage down to a certain degree. This is a big open field that isn't far from our house. You can see that we've got the home direction set. We've got 9 satellites, and then you can see all the other GPS data there along the right-hand side. And then we've got our battery information, our VTX information down there at the bottom. And then we've got a throttle position on the upper left section of the screen. And this isn't long range. Long range is really not my forte. Typically what I do are micros. When I first was approached about this product, it was a 3-incher, and then as the product was shipped, it was a 4-incher, which is fine. I've done 4-inchers before. I did look for some nice open farm country, because we are in farm country, to try to gain access to, because I don't want to just fly over someone else's property without knowing them and getting their authorization. This is public land over here, although we do have some hay bales out there, oddly enough. This is all floodplain to my knowledge. This is a trail that we actually walk as a family from time to time. So not a long range example. We don't have good points of interest around this location. You know, it's farm country. I'd hope to find a field that was nicely tilled or something that I could fly around. I called some of my friends that have lived in town their entire lives to see if they had any farm friends. Well, I grew up in farm country. Seems like I've maybe grown out of having contact with farming people, because none of my friends do and I don't. I guess that's a component of working in IT, my adult life. But we cruise around, and I am flying on an 850 milliamp 4S battery, as I said in the quick specs. The recommended battery is a 1,000 milliamp battery. And you'll notice that the GPS data can be a bit delayed. We're going to make a pass here along the top of this trail, and you'll see that I've got my 12-year-old with me, our middle child, and she is my spotter, and she is watching on a little FPV watch. Surely you've seen those from time to time. She's the one that, when I asked all the kids if they wanted to come out with me, I needed a spotter, she was the one that quickly volunteered. She likes to do new things. She likes to be active. And as she says, she likes to be productive with her time. So we spent part of our Saturday out here in the field flying around. Now, I do have a crash, and I'll show you the crash on this particular flight here in a little bit later. I think it comes in at around 8 minutes. We're not going to watch the entire flight. I did have a couple of crashes, and to my surprise, it survived just fine. I did shear off one of the screws, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the desk. I do want to jump ahead. You know, we've seen several minutes of the flight. I'm not carrying a payload. Like I said, I'm not carrying even the Insta360 Go. So this is how it flies, kind of naked. Being a micro guy, I don't have a lot of GoPros and GoPro mounts and things of that nature. You can see through this flight, we've got the kilometers per hour over there on the right-hand side, and that is a little bit delayed as with the rest of the GPS data. We're going to make a little bit of a speed run right here, and we'll watch that speed go up ever so slightly, get to 97, 110, 112. Looked like our max speed there was 112 kilometers per hour, which for those that do miles per hour is about 70, just under 70 miles per hour. But we cruise around. I am just kind of flying this in general flight purposes and showing you kind of some of the range, although I know it's not long range. I don't even have a patch antenna. I looked for my patch antenna, which I do have from purchases made several years ago, and I wasn't even able to locate it. So the reception that you're seeing is with the Orca goggles, with the rapid fire, and 2 circular polarized antennas. I know most people don't like to run that way or don't think you should run it that way, but I get excellent reception for what I normally do, which is not long range. range. Let's move ahead to the tail end of this flight. So my reception isn't quite as good as it was earlier. There is a cell phone tower off in the distance. It's not that far away. I would say about a mile and a half. And I have a feeling that started playing a role because it was fine for the longest time. But you can see I've activated GPS rescue, and I made the rookie mistake of doing it far too late. And our home direction is now off for some reason. I don't know why that is. I'm not a GPS expert, but as you can see, we quickly lose altitude and we're gonna go down in the brush. And unfortunately, that bush was very thorny. It was bringing it back in the proper direction, but the arrows seem to be pointing off in the distance. And while you don't see the quad in this picture, this is actually just to the right of that stump, or that main trunk that's in the center of the picture. That is what I was in. And I came out with a few scratches kind of all over my legs and arms, maybe on my back as well, but that was not a good patch to land in, so that was quite an adventure. Let's take a look at another crash that I had. So we're cruising along, and we're just gonna kind of explore the area a little bit. As I head towards these trees, I think, oh, I'll just shoot that gap between the trees, and I get a little bit closer, and I'm like, I'm too high, should have bailed. Oh, nope. Got tangled up. So I show you those crashes just to give you some idea or data points about the durability, because one of the concerns I had was these arms are very, very skinny to gain that extra efficiencies for being able to fly a very long time, and I didn't break an arm on either of those crashes. Now, the brush out there was very thick, and it was actually kind of hard to walk through. I would estimate it was somewhere around 3 foot high, a good part of the brush. It wasn't... When I say thick, I don't want to make you think I was walking on top of a cushion of brush, but as you had to kind of dig through the brush, it came up to about waist high on me, which is somewhere around 3 feet. This is flight footage. We've jumped well into this flight in the backyard just to give you an extra data point about if you want to do some sort of more aggressive flight. You want to see some of the punch outs. You want to see how well it handles turns, whether it's tight turns or what have you. You know, it's not necessarily made for this sort of flight, but it gives you some assurance about what it can do in this space in my hands. Again, I am flying the same battery I showed you in the quick specs, the 850 milliamp 4S battery, and I do not have an HD camera on board. But I decided to do this because I did think more aggressive flight is a possibility for someone to get some extra sample of, you know, you're going to be looking at this at long range, but maybe once you get to your point of interest, you want to do something like punch over the top of it, or maybe you want to do a power loop, or you want to do something, and you do get to hear the quad, which is a fairly important part of our quads and where we fly them, is how noisy are they. Moving ahead further in this flight, you can see we're at just about 7 minutes, and I moved ahead just to be able to show you the end of the flight as well, so you can get a flight time on that. We've got the flashing for on time. I'm uncertain why on time is a warning time. For me, on time is not a warning time. Usually I'm most concerned about my battery voltage, but in this case it is flashing, so it's something to take note of. It's something you may want to change when you get one of your own. Our battery is near the end, but not all the way to the end, and this gives you a sample of the efficiency, at least of this battery on this quad, and how long it can fly at that level. You'll also notice that my satellite information is all blank. I did not wait for the satellites to link up. Therefore, we don't have any GPS information that can be of use down there. I wouldn't think that the kilometers per hour is accurate, so I wouldn't worry so much about that as well. You can see we come down there at 3.49 volts per cell. We got just under 8 minutes of flight in that particular flight style. So go easy on me. I'm not a long range guy. I'm learning along the way, and one of the things that I want to know from you that do have long range experience, when you're looking at a new quad, what are you looking for? What are the points that I need to make sure I hit on for future long-range reviews, should I do any of them? This is well outside my forte. This is not something I'm highly experienced in. Sitting back and thinking about what things someone who does do long-range, I think the GPS part, I showed you that data, but I didn't have the latitude and longitude on there. That's not just information I want floating around on the internet, so I took that off, but you got to see where it had all the satellites, especially during that flight when we were in a big open field. I think we had a maximum of 15 satellites. My understanding of GPS and its use outside of the just GPS data for knowing your distance and altitude, things of that nature, is that you need 5 satellites in order to be able to use rescue. If you have a fail-safe, which this has the FrSky XM Plus in it, so not a traditional long-range receiver, but you know, depending upon your perspective, you may see it one way or another. If you have a fail-safe, the GPS rescue will kick on. In the end case where I showed you where it was coming in the general direction, it wasn't coming directly back to my home point. I'm curious about that, and because my reception for video also fell off and that cell phone tower being relatively close, I know that's not ideal, but I think I had some other things at play, because for the good portion of the first part of that flight, the GPS data, while you know it doesn't update in second by second, it takes it a little bit of time to kind of come around. It seemed accurate, so I'm wondering if there's something with that cell phone tower or some other environmental experience that I had that made the GPS rescue. One, I turned it on way too late in the battery and kind of fell out of the air, and two, it wasn't as accurate as it was earlier in the flight. So that location isn't ideal for this testing either. But it sounds like I'm making excuses. That is all part of the reasons why I need to know from people who do have these experiences, or if you're looking to get into long-range flying, what is it that you're wanting to see? So if I were to do another review like this in the future, I can best possibly show them to you. Now, back to the screw that is gone. That screw actually got severed off. This whole standoff, I've turned it over since then. So when I had the second crash, this screw right here was seared off within the nylon standoff. I haven't been able to get it out yet, so I flew it like this in the backyard. That was the more aggressive flight that I showed you. And one of the things, the reason why I want to point that out is that the arm stood up to the crash, the screw did not. Of course, screws, most of us probably have some sort of receptacle full of various screws, and we can replace those generally quite easily, versus having extra arms on hand. That is a different expense, a different time to getting a new arm, even though it does ship with one replacement arm for the front and the back. They aren't interlocked arms, they kind of just butt up against each other, so if you take out these two screws, you will get some movement here. They've secured the wires down with tape that I like. It's a little bit wider tape. It's the same tape that I like for quads and general purposes. It's this, I call it Emax tape. It probably has another name. Emax is oftentimes sold out of it. I've linked down in the video description kind of the general stuff that I use. I've got this Emax tape link. That link does go to Banggood. Banggood is about the only place I can generally find it in stock. Emax seems to be out of stock most of the time. On the crash that I showed you where I landed in the thorny bush, what saved my bacon here, and the reason why we can see the quad today is because of this buzzer, this beeper back here. While it wasn't dark, I couldn't necessarily see the light. The battery went completely flat. It powered off the flight stack, and the battery with the buzzer was going off, and that's how I located it, because as you saw from the video, it wasn't very precise, my reception or DVR down to that last minute. So that buzzer right there, especially I can see for long range purposes, is critical to being able to recover and you have a situation like mine. You can see how they've got things mounted with the GPS. They've got a 3D print kind of surrounding everything back here. They've mounted things. Now it does sit on this buzzer just a little bit, so if you have a hard flat surface, you'll see that it's difficult to see, but it's tipped up just a little bit from the tail end because it is sitting on this buzzer. So this isn't one you would want to skid along the asphalt, because you'll probably take out your buzzer. I only mention that because you never know what sort of questions you're going to get on reviews, and I try to answer as many questions as I can within the review itself. The max setting that you saw in the VTX, that is 450 milliwatts, so that is what we were flying out there in the open field when it said A1 max band channel, and then the voltage, or the milliwatts that we were flying at. So when it says max, that means 450. You just have to check the VTX tables, and we have a nice little, you can't see all of it, inspired by Dave C FPV. This is the battery pad. This pad is not rubberized, it's foam, so it's not particularly sticky. You're either going to need to add some stick to your battery to make it stick to the foam. A rubber band will even work. And also, you know, make sure you've got your strap down nice and tight. It's a good thick metal buckle strap, so that shouldn't go anywhere. Also notice on this front section, this is not two plates. That was something that I noticed right away. They've got a little bit of a design in where they carved out the top section of the carbon right in this area. This is not two plates. Hopefully you can see that that is one solid piece of carbon, and they've just kind of taken out a little bit of this reserve to add some design flair to it. We don't have any strain relief on our battery back here, so that's something that I would suggest adding, is maybe taking a zip tie and taking it around the battery strap here, and maybe this post. Our clearance on the back end, let me turn it this way. Our clearance on the back end, well, it's very close. Oh, that's something else I noticed. Keep this pushed up. because those props go very close to right. Can you see how close that is? It's not horrible close, but if you have an arm flex in a punch out or something and this 3D printed piece is down, you may get a little bit of a strike. Shouldn't make you crash, shouldn't make you fall out of the air, but it may be something to keep an eye on to make sure you don't have an unfortunate happening. But that's where I would secure that down, just to make sure if you have a battery ejection, you don't tear the battery lead off the ESC. We have a capacitor down here, and once again, I can't quite make out. I can make out what it says, but it doesn't have the voltage and the microfarad on it in the way that I can see it. I believe it is a 25 volt, 220 microfarad, but just call out the fact that it does have a capacitor down in there. We've got a two-plate design here. We've got the plate above that is kind of the tail, and then we've got the plate below, which is the camera, so it gives you a nice low stack. I believe there's also a DJI version of this. At the time that I'm recording, I don't have access to the product page as the product has not launched yet. I'll include a link to the product page in the video description down below if you do want to check it out. But before you go to that product page, please let me know what you're looking for in long-range quads. I'm curious to know what I should be doing to be able to show you what you need to know before you were to make a purchase or any other research that you might be doing. And if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.